My name is Naomi Alvarez, and at 31 years old, I had lived a life that felt more like servitude than daughterhood. For as long as I can remember, my wealthy parents treated me as if I were nothing more than a housemaid, while my younger brother Adrian basked in privileges fit for a prince. Every celebration, every family reunion, I was tucked away in the kitchen, preparing meals, scrubbing dishes, ensuring everything looked perfect. Adrian, he laughed and networked, praised as the golden child. The breaking point came on Christmas Eve. My mother, Camila, called me late that night with a demand that was impossible and cruel. Cook a banquet for 25 of Adrian's corporate guests, all within 24 hours. The tone in her voice left no room for protest. But something inside me cracked. Years of humiliation, invisibility, and emotional bruises rose like a tide. For the first time in my life, I didn't bend. What followed shattered our family's illusions and forced everyone, including a powerful business magnate, to confront the truth. I didn't just refuse their demand. I uncovered a secret so devastating that it silenced a room of elite executives. This is the story of how I went from being the invisible daughter to the one they could no longer ignore. And it all began on a cold December evening in Brooklyn as I folded clothes into a suitcase, already planning to escape the role they'd trapped me in. My phone rang. The screen flashed. Mom. I already knew what awaited me. Never love, never warmth, always orders. Cancel whatever nonsense you have planned for tomorrow, she barked before I could even say hello. Adrian is hosting an exclusive Christmas Eve dinner at the estate. 25 executives. You will cook. I'll send the menu. Be there by noon. I kept folding my blazer, her voice slicing through me. What's happening tomorrow? I asked flatly. Executives from Regal International, she said, smug. Important people. People who matter. Adrian needs this, Naomi. You should be grateful to help. Her words cut deep. Grateful to help? As though my existence had no meaning beyond serving her perfect son's ambitions. I glanced at my laptop. On the screen was an email from Evelyn Park, CEO of Regal International, addressed directly to me. She wasn't coming for Adrian, she was coming for me. She wanted to finalize a contract worth millions with my company. My company. If only my mother knew. If only she had ever cared enough to ask. She hung up after one last command. Don't embarrass us. The irony wasn't lost on me. I stared at the plane ticket on my nightstand. Departure to Miami, Christmas Day, 8 p.m. A ticket not for escape but for the biggest meeting of my career. And in that moment I decided, for once I wasn't going to cave. 15 years of memories clawed at me. 15 years of invisibility. Thanksgiving dinners where Adrian entertained guests while I spent 14 hours in the kitchen. Birthdays where he was showered with gifts while I was handed a dish rag. My parents called him our success story, and introduced me as, Naomi's here too, she helps out. At Adrian's engagement gala, I had worked behind the scenes until my hands blistered, while he waltzed across the ballroom in a designer suit my parents paid for. And when a guest asked what I did, my mother laughed. Naomi doesn't have Adrian's social charm, but she cooks well. That was my label. The cook, the servant, the shadow. But in the quiet of my own life, I was something else entirely. Inside a leather-bound folder in my suitcase was the truth. A contract bearing the name of my company, Aurora Events. For 5 years I had built an empire silently, deliberately omitting my family name. 50 employees. Luxury resorts as clients. Multi-million-dollar deals. The very next day, while they expected me to sweat in the kitchen, I was scheduled to secure a contract that would redefine my company forever. A deal worth $2 million, a partnership with Regal International. And yet my phone buzzed again. Adrian's smug text. Mom says you're cooking tomorrow. Don't screw this up. Important people will be there. For once I smiled. Not this time, I whispered. Not ever again. 2 signs had told me years ago exactly where I stood in my family, and I had ignored them for too long. The first came when my father introduced me to a colleague at the country club. Adrian is our pride, our shining star, he boasted. Then with a dismissive chuckle, Naomi's between opportunities. Between opportunities. That very morning I had closed a $500,000 contract. But in their eyes, I was perpetually failing. They never asked how I afforded my downtown apartment, my car, my travels. To them I was the eternal disappointment. The second sign was even crueler. Last summer, I returned home to find my childhood bedroom gutted and transformed into Adrian's extra storage closet. My trophies, books, photographs, all shoved into boxes in the basement. Adrian needs the space, my mother explained. Image matters in his line of work. Meanwhile, they funded an entire floor renovation for him. Private office, walk-in wardrobe, polished oak finishes. The message was clear. One child was an investment, the other disposable. But outside their gaze I thrived. At Aurora Events' holiday party just last week, 50 employees toasted me, their CEO. They called me a visionary, a leader, a builder of dreams. I scrolled through photos, shaking hands with mayors, cutting ribbons at resort openings, featured in industry magazines. Achievements my family never saw because they never asked. And now on Christmas Eve they wanted me to vanish again into their kitchen. They had no idea their failure was about to become their reckoning. My assistant's message flashed across my screen. Forbes wants you for their 40 under 40 feature. They love the story about building without family support. I almost laughed. Without family support. My family hadn't just ignored me, they had buried me alive in their narrative of failure. 5 years of silence. 5 years of never once asking Naomi, what do you do? They painted their own picture. A jobless daughter clinging to scraps, surviving off old savings. At least she can cook, my mother would sigh, as if that was the only value I brought to the world. They didn't know about my chefs, my managers, my multi-million-dollar pipeline. They didn't know that my calendar reminder wasn't for some petty errand but for the meeting that would decide Aurora's future. That contract wasn't just numbers. It was Maria, my head chef, putting a down payment on her first house. It was Joseph, my operations manager, paying for his daughter's college. It was stability, growth, and a national stage. And then the irony. My mother's urgent email landed in my inbox. Attached was the Christmas Eve menu. 7 entrees, 10 sides, wine pairings. She demanded I use the silver, the Waterford crystal. And on the guest list, my breath caught, Evelyn Park, CEO of Regal International. The same woman I was flying to meet in Miami was expected at my parents' house tomorrow, to be served by their useless daughter. My heart thundered. Fate was no longer whispering. It was roaring. When I read my mother's email again, my pulse quickened. There, buried among the pretentious wine pairings and impossible demands, was the name that made my decision both terrifying and inevitable. Evelyn Park. The very same woman I had been negotiating with for months. The one whose signature would secure Aurora Events' biggest deal yet. And now, she was coming to my parents' house, expecting to be served dinner by the daughter they dismissed as worthless. I sank into my bed, my phone buzzing with Adrian's taunting message. Don't embarrass us. Victoria Chin will be there. She's huge in hospitality. I'll pitch her PR services. Just stay in the kitchen where you belong. Amateur cooking, he called it. They didn't know that my company had catered Regal International's corporate retreat for 500 people just last month. Evelyn hadn't met me personally. Our executives had handled the logistics. Tomorrow was supposed to be our first face-to-face meeting. Now fate had twisted the knife. Did I stay and let them parade me as a failure in front of the woman who was about to change my life? Or did I walk away, risk my family's wrath, and hold on to the future I had bled for? On my kitchen counter, my flight reminder popped up. Your driver to JFK arrives at 6:30 p.m. tomorrow. I stared at my ticket, then at the absurd menu, then at the Aurora contract glowing on my laptop. The choice was no longer complicated. That evening I made the call I'd dreaded for years. Finally, my mother snapped as she picked up. I was starting to worry you weren't taking this seriously. Mom, I said firmly, I can't do it. Silence, sharp as glass. Then her voice hardened. What do you mean you can't? You will. I have a business trip. I'm flying to Miami. She actually laughed, cruel and cutting. Business trip? Don't be ridiculous. What business could you possibly have? My throat burned. An important meeting. Naomi, she scoffed. Stop pretending. Adrian has real responsibilities. You have nothing. Family comes first. Or are you too selfish to understand that? I understand perfectly, I whispered. Family comes first only when you need me to cook. How dare you, she screeched. What else do you have to do? Sit alone in your apartment on Christmas. I looked at my business class ticket, at the contract in my suitcase. I have a flight at 8 p.m. Cancel it, she demanded. No. If you leave, don't bother coming back. Her threat hung in the air, the same one she had used to chain me down for years. Usually it worked. Usually I caved. But this time my voice came out steady. Then I guess this is goodbye. For a moment I thought she'd cry. Instead she hissed, "Ungrateful girl," before slamming the line dead. My hands trembled, but not from fear. For the first time in 15 years the shaking came from freedom. The barrage came instantly. Adrian's texts lit up my phone like wildfire. "What did you just do? Mom's losing it. She says you've lost your mind. Stop being dramatic and get over here." I ignored them. Then he called, his voice shrill. "You've humiliated Mom. She's calling everyone, saying you've abandoned family on Christmas. What are you thinking?" "I have a business meeting, Adrian. This isn't about you or Mom. This is about my career." He laughed bitterly. "Career? What career? You cook sometimes, Naomi. Don't delude yourself." I bit back my anger. "I own a catering company. Aurora Events." "Sure you do. Look, I'll pay you to cook. $200. That should cover your rent." I nearly laughed. My day rate as a private chef was $5,000. Not that he'd ever know. "This isn't negotiable. I'm not coming. Mom will disown you. That's her choice. You're going to ruin Christmas. You're going to ruin my chance to pitch to Evelyn Park. Then hire a caterer." "It's Christmas Eve," he howled. "No one's available. You're insane." On my counter, I had scribbled a list of emergency catering hotlines. I'd even left my business card there, though I knew they would never see it. I wasn't heartless. I'd given them options. But I refused to chain myself back into servitude. Adrian's final words rang like poison. "If you do this, you're dead to us." I whispered to the empty room, "I've been dead to you for years." The next day unraveled like fate's cruelest joke. At 6 p.m. on Christmas Eve, the Alvarez estate kitchen sat spotless and empty. My mother frantically called restaurants within a 50-mile radius, but everything was closed. Guests began to arrive: investment bankers, PR executives, polished elites. And among them the woman herself, Evelyn Park. I wasn't there to see it, but Adrian's desperate texts painted the picture. "Mom's panicking. Nothing's ready. She's screaming that you abandoned us. Guests are here. Evelyn looks disgusted." By 7:30 the humiliations reached their peak. With no food prepared, they ordered pizza. Papa John's. Domino's. Served on Waterford crystal plates, the pride of my mother's cabinets. My phone buzzed again. "Naomi, you've destroyed us. Evelyn left early. Mom says you're a disgrace." I shut my phone off, leaned back in the airplane seat and watched as the city lights of Connecticut blurred into darkness below. While they scrambled with pizza boxes and excuses, I was flying toward a future where my worth was undeniable. In 12 hours I would be sitting across from Evelyn Park herself, not as their servant but as the CEO of Aurora Events. The irony was exquisite. The resort suite in Miami welcomed me with floor-to-ceiling glass and the rhythmic crash of waves against the shore. A bottle of champagne waited on ice with a handwritten note. "Welcome, Ms. Alvarez. Looking forward to our partnership. Evelyn Park." I set down my suitcase and checked my phone. Dozens of missed calls from my mother. 18 from Adrian. Even 3 from my father, the man who usually lived in silence. I deleted them all. Then an email caught my eye. My PR manager had sent the final draft of the Forbes feature. The headline read, "From Invisible to Indispensable: How Naomi Alvarez Built a Catering Empire Without a Dollar of Family Money." They had even chosen me for the cover. My photo, confident and professional, would be plastered across newsstands in 48 hours. Another email arrived, this one from Evelyn. "I'll be arriving late to tomorrow's dinner, coming straight from a social engagement in Connecticut. Hope that's all right." Connecticut. My parents' house. He had been there. She had seen the chaos, the pizza boxes, the humiliation. My assistant texted, "Reporters want to know if you'll comment on your family." Should I tell them no? I typed back, "Tell them they'll find out when everyone else does." I stood at the window, the moonlight catching the waves below. Tomorrow I would face Evelyn, not as the invisible daughter serving food, but as the CEO holding the pen to a $2 million contract. And for the first time in my life I was ready. Christmas morning dawned and I awoke in my Miami suite with sunlight spilling across the ocean. My phone lit up with chaos from Connecticut. Adrian's texts poured in like venom. Mom is hysterical. Guests left early. Do you realize what you've done? By 7 p.m. the night before, the Alvarez home had become a battlefield. 25 polished executives and one of the most powerful women in hospitality sat at a dining table set for royalty, only to be served greasy pizza in crystal bowls. My mother had spent weeks boasting that her daughter Naomi would prepare an unforgettable meal. And in a way she wasn't wrong. The evening would be unforgettable but for reasons she never imagined. Evelyn, according to Adrian's texts, had left after less than half an hour. She looked disgusted, he wrote. She'll never respect our family again. I sat in my suite, sipping coffee, my laptop glowing with tomorrow's presentation slides. In 12 hours I'd meet Evelyn face to face, not as the invisible cook she'd been promised, but as the architect of a company that had already served her brand in silence. I wondered if she'd connect the dots. If she'd remember my last name. If she'd recall the humiliation of eating pizza at a mansion where she was promised gourmet. The irony carved a smile across my lips. While my family drowned in disgrace, I was about to take the stage of my life. That evening I arrived at the Regal International Resort boardroom, nerves coiled like steel wires in my chest. The dinner meeting was set for 7 p.m. I wore my sharpest charcoal suit, hair pinned back, confidence stitched into every detail of my appearance. When Evelyn entered, she greeted me warmly but with visible fatigue. I must apologize for being late, she said, placing her clutch on the table. I came straight from the most bizarre Christmas Eve party in Connecticut. My heart didn't skip, it steadied. This was the moment I'd prepared for. Oh, I asked casually, masking the storm inside. You won't believe this, she said with a rueful laugh. The hostess, a woman named Camila Alvarez, promised us an extravagant feast, all prepared by her daughter. Instead we arrived to find chaos. No food prepared. Empty kitchen. And then, pizza. Pizza Naomi. Served on crystal. I tilted my head sympathetically, forcing neutrality into my voice. That must have been awkward. It was worse than awkward, Evelyn said, shaking her head. The mother spent the evening ridiculing her older daughter, calling her unstable, a disappointment, saying she couldn't keep a job. My throat tightened but I kept my face serene. She insisted this missing daughter was supposed to cook everything, Evelyn continued. Yet she just vanished. She looked at me with a faint smile. Families are complicated, aren't they? I returned the smile, calm on the outside but inside a fire burned. Tomorrow she would learn the truth. December 26th. The day that would decide everything. I stood at the head of Regal's boardroom, presentation slides flickering behind me, contract folders neatly stacked in front of each executive. My voice flowed steady and confident, outlining Aurora event strategy, our track record, our vision for the future. Every eye was on me, every head nodding. Until Evelyn's assistant walked in with an iPad. Miss Park, you need to see this, he whispered. Evelyn's brow furrowed as she scrolled. Confusion clouded her face, then disbelief. Finally shock. She lifted her gaze to me, then back to the screen, then to me again. Naomi, she said slowly, this photo is from the Alvarez house in Connecticut. She turned the screen. My heart thudded. There I was, barely visible in a Thanksgiving family photo posted online. My parents front and center, Adrian smug in his tailored suit, and me standing in the shadows behind them. Is this you? She asked. I inhaled deeply. Yes. Camila Alvarez is your mother? Yes. The room went silent. You could hear the scratch of a pen being set down. The woman who called you unemployed, unstable, unworthy, that was your mother? Yes. Evelyn stood and walked to the window. For a moment I feared she'd dismiss me too. But when she turned, her eyes glimmered, not with disdain but something else entirely. You chose this, she said quietly. You chose your company over humiliation. I nodded. I chose myself. Evelyn's laughter filled the boardroom, startling everyone. It wasn't cruel, it was incredulous, almost joyful. My God, she said, wiping a tear. Your mother spent the entire night insulting you. And all the while, you're the CEO I've been trying to meet for 2 years. Her business partner leaned forward, his voice awed. So the daughter they treated like hired help is the one running this empire? I confirmed with a simple nod. Evelyn shook her head, pulling out her phone. I have to see this for myself. He typed in my name. Search results flooded the screen. Articles, awards, interviews. My James Beard Award nomination. My Hospitality Quarterly feature. A Wall Street Journal piece about women entrepreneurs. Evelyn's assistant rushed back in. Forbes just announced tomorrow's 40 Under 40 cover. He projected it onto the boardroom screen. And there I was, front and center, headline blazing, From Invisible to Indispensable. How Naomi Alvarez Built a Catering Empire Without a Dollar of Family Money. The room gasped. Evelyn whispered, Your family doesn't know any of this, do they? No, I said firmly. They never asked. James, her partner, whistled low. Your mother will open Forbes tomorrow and see the daughter she mocked on the cover of a national magazine. For the first time I allowed myself to smile. Yes. She will. Evelyn excused herself briefly, making a phone call just outside the glass wall of the boardroom. Through the pane we could see her gesturing animatedly. When she returned, her expression was unreadable. I just spoke to your mother, she said calmly. My stomach dropped. You what? I told her I was disappointed in last night's dinner and would no longer consider doing business with her family. She begged me to reconsider, blamed everything on her older daughter. Then I told her the truth. I'd already signed a $2 million contract with her daughter, the CEO of Aurora Events. Gasps echoed around the room. What did she say? I asked, my voice barely audible. The sound she made, Evelyn said with a small smile, was like the air had been sucked from her lungs. And then she hung up. My phone buzzed on the table, 47 missed calls in 3 minutes, all from my mother. Evelyn extended her hand. Ms. Alvarez, let's finalize this partnership. You've more than earned it. As I signed my name, champagne corks popped. Applause filled the room. And then another buzz, a text from my father. Your mother just fainted. What in God's name is Aurora Events? I tucked my phone away, raised my glass and met Evelyn's eyes. To boundaries, she toasted. To freedom, I replied. And as the golden bubbles touched my lips, I knew I had finally stepped out of the shadows for good. The celebration in Regal's boardroom felt unreal. Bright light, clinking glasses, contracts stacked like a promise I had finally kept to myself. While I spoke with the finance director about rollout milestones, Evelyn lifted her phone, framed me between the contract folders and the skyline, and snapped a photo. Mind if I share? She asked. Go ahead, I said, heart drumming. Minutes later, her post went live. Thrilled to announce our multi-year partnership with Aurora Events and their brilliant CEO Naomi Alvarez. Excellence, grit and grace. Can't wait to elevate our guest experience together. He tagged my company. She tagged me. And, like a match dropped into dry straw, she tagged Camila Alvarez. The reactions detonated. Former clients commented memories of flawless events. Resort GMs chimed in with praise. Chefs from 3 cities sent emojis of knives and confetti. I watched, not gloating but steady, like a tide coming in that had always been scheduled by the moon. My phone shook on the table. Ring. I let it ring until Evelyn nodded permission. I put him on speaker. This can't be real, he blurted. Naomi, is this a prank? Mom says you photoshopped a contract. Evelyn raised an eyebrow, amused. Tell him we don't Photoshop. Adrian, I said evenly, I'm in a room with the board of Regal International. The signatures are real. He went quiet, then reloaded his anger. You humiliated us. Evelyn saw the pizza. You did this on purpose. I chose my company over servitude, I replied. If humiliation happened, it's because you promised me as staff to people who should have met me as a peer. You're cold. I've been compliant, I corrected. There's a difference. I ended the call, and for the first time in years no guilt followed. Evelyn lifted her glass. To the woman who refused to stay small. I touched my flute to hers and felt something resolve in my bones. I was done being available to anyone who refused to really see me. That evening the calls from my mother came in waves. Voicemails layered with tears, accusation and bargaining. I listened to none of them. When I finally called back, she answered before the first ring finished. How could you do this? Camila sobbed, grief and fury braided together. People are asking why we didn't know. Do you understand what you've made us look like? I didn't make you look like anything, I said gently. You looked past me for 15 years. The world is simply seeing the gap you insisted on. We asked about your life, she insisted. You asked me to cook. Silence. Then the old voice returned, brittle as glass. Why didn't you tell us? I did. In 100 small ways. You laughed. You changed the subject. You gave my room to Adrian's suits and called it practicality. Stop bringing up that room, she snapped, then softer. I didn't think it mattered. It mattered to me, I said. It taught me exactly where I stood. She inhaled shakily. Fine. What do you want? Money? Recognition? I'll host a party in your honor. We'll fix this. This isn't a PR problem, Mom. Kept my tone even. It's a boundary problem. I'm willing to rebuild, but only if the foundation changes. What foundation? Equal respect. No more servant roles. Public acknowledgement of who I am and what I've built. And therapy, individual and family. Not as punishment, as repair. She was quiet for a long time. You sound like a stranger. I finally sound like myself. When I hung up, my hands were steady. I wrote my terms on a single sheet and slid it into my planner. If my family wanted access to me, they would meet the woman I had become, not the helper they had scripted. By the next afternoon, consequences arrived with surgical precision. The charity league my mother chaired posted a polite notice about leadership transitions. Her name was absent from the news slate. Anonymized blogs gossiped about the Crystal Pizza affair, relaying it with the hushed awe of a campfire story. At the club, someone captured a blurred photo of Waterford plates holding pepperoni slices. The caption read, "Etiquette lesson. Never promise what you've outsourced to a scapegoat." Adrian called again, voice hoarse, arrogance scraped thin. Regal cancelled our exploratory PR engagement, he said. 2 other clients followed. They're saying we don't respect basic professional boundaries. I closed my eyes. I hadn't wanted blood. Just oxygen. I never asked for your clients to leave, I told him. But integrity has a way of auditing books we keep crooked. You think you're righteous? You could have saved us with 1 casserole. And you could have saved me with 1 question. Naomi, what do you do? He exhaled, a sound like surrender refusing to identify itself. Mom can't stop crying, he murmured. Dad's quiet. He keeps staring at that old photo of us, Thanksgiving, the one where you're in the back half hidden. I remember. He asked me why none of us noticed. Because noticing would have required changing the story, I said. And the story served you. He didn't argue. For the first time he didn't know how. What happens now? He asked, small as a boy. You learn, I said. Or you keep losing what you think you're owed. I hung up, then walked onto the balcony. Miami wind lifted my hair. The ocean kept confessing the same truth in its endless language. You can't hold back a tide by pretending it is rain. The week after the announcement felt like stepping into a sunlit atrium after years in the basement. Inquiries flooded our inbox. Destination weddings, resort partnerships, corporate retreats with multi-market footprints. My operations manager, Joseph, built a triage board that looked like air traffic control. Maria, my head chef, curated a modular menu architecture we could scale without thinning the soul out of our plates. We hired 20 new staff, sous chefs, coordinators, logistics leads, and promoted from within. Evelyn did more than sign a contract. She opened a gate. Her emails came with subject lines like, I know, a friend you must meet and high-trust partner, you'll love them. From those conversations alone, 3 major contracts crystallized, totaling 8 figures across 2 years. I updated our health benefits, added paid sabbaticals for culinary staff, and launched apprenticeships for overlooked talent. Single parents, career shifters, kids who needed one adult to bet on them. A producer from a streaming network reached out about a limited docuseries, working title Unhidden, Building Aurora. The pitch was respectful, almost tender. Not a revenge story, she said. A craft story. A leadership story. Then an invitation arrived from Harrington School of Hospitality. The college I'd once been told was too ambitious. They wanted a keynote. Success without permission. Designing a career when the door stays closed. I accepted, added a slide with staff photos instead of metrics and titled it The People Who Built the Numbers. Every night that week I walked my kitchen line before closing, sleeves rolled, tasting sauces, asking about sore wrists and bus schedules. If power didn't make me more human, it would make me nothing at all. 3 months later, I chose the restaurant for our meeting carefully. Quiet, warm light. A round table that forced eye contact without the geometry of sides. When my parents and Adrian walked in, they looked smaller, yes, but also human in a way I'd protected myself from seeing. I placed one sheet of paper at the center. Before anyone speaks, these are my terms, I said. Not a performance. A covenant. They leaned in. Equal respect or no contact. No servant roles ever again. Public acknowledgement of my work and position. Genuine apology, specific and unvarnished. Therapy, family and individual, for at least 6 months. My mother's eyes glittered, not with anger, but with a grief that had learned how to name itself. Naomi, she said, voice fragile, I'm sorry. Not just for Christmas Eve. For making you smaller so I could feel big. For confusing control with love. For not asking. My father cleared his throat. I knew in pieces, he admitted. I chose quiet. That made me a co-author. Adrian stared at the tablecloth. I liked being the star, he whispered. Mom liked me better when you were invisible. That did something to me I don't like. I let the silence sit long enough to be honest. If we rebuild, I said, I'm not coming back as staff. I'm coming back as a daughter and a sister, with boundaries. They nodded. My mother even smiled wobbly. If I ever ask Aurora to cater, she said, I'll pay full rate, sign the contract and confirm the deposit like everyone else. That, I said almost laughing, is music. We ate. We didn't solve everything. We named everything. And sometimes that's the first real architecture of change. When we stood to leave, my mother reached out, stopped herself and asked, May I hug you? For the first time, I said, yes. 6 months later, I invited my family to my apartment for dinner. My real apartment, not the tiny studio they'd always imagined. My condo overlooked Central Park, 2 bedrooms wrapped in windows, walls hung with photos of staff and milestones. But this time I didn't cook. Aurora Events catered the same as we would for any high-end client. My team arrived in uniforms, trays balanced, service flawless. I played host, not servant. As my parents and Adrian sat at the table, there was a moment of dissonance. They were used to me moving silently in the background, refilling glasses, sweeping crumbs. Now my staff did those things, addressing me with "Yes, boss," or "Of course, Ms. Alvarez." Adrian's eyes darted around the apartment, taking in the framed Forbes cover and a photo of me shaking hands with Evelyn Park at the contract signing. My father stared at the Central Park view, quiet, then said softly, "You built this on your own." I did, I answered simply. My mother fidgeted with her napkin, her voice careful. "It feels strange being served here." "That's the point," I said evenly. "I'm not here to prove I can feed you. I'm here to show you the life I built when no one asked if I could." For the first time they didn't argue. They ate. They watched. They listened. And when dessert came, a chocolate torte plated with gold leaf, they said thank you. To me. To my staff. Small words, but for us, revolutionary. The following weeks brought subtle shifts. My mother, who once thrived on country club gossip, began showing up at therapy sessions with red eyes but open ears. My father, long silent, started introducing me not as our other daughter, but as Naomi Alvarez, CEO of Aurora Events. The pride in his voice sounded tentative but real. Adrian struggled the most. His PR firm had lost half its clients and he resented the collapse. But one evening he called not to rant but to confess. "I used to enjoy being the favorite," he admitted. "It made me feel important. But now I see what it cost you and maybe what it cost me too." "You still have a business," I reminded him. "You can rebuild." "Not if I cling to being the chosen one," he said bitterly. "That part's gone." I didn't soothe him. He needed to sit in the emptiness the same way I had sat in invisibility for years. Growth doesn't come from comfort. Meanwhile, Aurora soared. With new contracts, we expanded into 5 cities: New York, Miami, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Dallas. I hired talent overlooked by the industry. A pastry chef rejected for his accent, an event coordinator dismissed for being a single mother, a logistics lead who'd aged out of entry-level but hadn't been given a chance. Maria, my head chef, said it best, "We're not just building a company. We're building a refuge for people who've been underestimated." And in that truth, I realized Aurora wasn't just my rebellion. It was my redemption. The media storm never fully died. Even months later, articles circulated. The Crystal Pizza affair, how one family's snub sparked a business legend. My mother hated it, but slowly she stopped fighting it. Sometimes, surrender is the first apology. One evening, I was invited to deliver a keynote at Harrington School of Hospitality. The very place my parents once called too ambitious for me now wanted me on stage. I walked into a packed auditorium, students, faculty, industry professionals. My presentation was titled Success Without Permission. I told them my story, not as revenge but as blueprint. About being underestimated. About choosing silence when arguing would have been wasted breath. About building something so undeniable that no one could pretend it wasn't there. When I finished, the room stood in ovation. Cameras flashed. Students rushed forward to shake my hand. And then, to my surprise, I saw my father at the back of the hall, clapping slowly but steadily, his eyes shining with something I'd never seen before. Respect unfiltered by comparison. That night he told me, I used to think protecting family image mattered most. Now I see that protecting family truth is the only thing that lasts. I didn't forgive him instantly. Forgiveness is a garden. It needs watering, not a single rainfall. But I let his words root. It was more than I'd ever been given. And as I looked at the crowd that night, I knew my story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every invisible person ready to step into light. Aurora Events reached 100 employees. Our calendar was booked 8 months out, our waitlist longer than I could have imagined. But what I cherished most wasn't the revenue. It was walking into a room where staff called me boss with pride, where no one was invisible, where no one was the servant. The documentary Unhidden, Building Aurora premiered to glowing reviews. Cameras followed me into kitchens, boardrooms, quiet moments with staff. They captured my voice saying, "You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm." That line spread across social media, shared by people who'd never heard of me before. The documentary closed with footage from that family dinner in my apartment. My mother asking, "May I hug you?" The producers blurred her face, but the emotion was raw. The world saw a glimpse of reconciliation without erasure, boundaries without bitterness. Critics called it a story of refusal as survival. Meanwhile, my family continued their slow rebuild. My mother publicly acknowledged me at the country club, telling the crowd, "I was blind to my daughter's brilliance. I won't be again." The apology didn't fix everything, but it began something. Adrian submitted a PR proposal to Aurora, not under my name but through proper channels. His pitch was good, sharp, professional, humbled by failure. I didn't say yes immediately. I told him, "We'll consider it." And he nodded, no entitlement in his eyes. For the first time, it felt like family wasn't a hierarchy. It was becoming finally a choice. Now every morning I wake with a ritual. I stand before the mirror, straighten my suit jacket and whisper, "I am Naomi Alvarez, CEO of Aurora Events. Not the family servant. Not invisible. Never again." Our company continues to grow, but growth doesn't define me anymore. What defines me is the freedom to choose my worth. My parents still stumble. Old habits die slowly. But when they slip into old patterns, I stop them. Respect is non-negotiable. And to their credit, they try again differently. Therapy helps. Humility helps more. Adrian is rebuilding. Slowly, clumsily, but with more honesty than I thought he had. Sometimes we meet for coffee. Sometimes we even laugh. Feels like siblings, not rivals. But the greatest transformation is in me. I no longer shrink to fit. I no longer accept invisibility as destiny. I no longer measure my worth by who applauds or who doubts. The world now knows my story, through Forbes, through the documentary, through every client who sees Aurora not just as a company, but as proof that underestimated doesn't mean incapable. And if there's one truth I leave with you, it's this. Your value doesn't decrease because someone else refuses to see it. Their blindness is not your mirror. To anyone reading who feels unseen, unheard, unvalued, build anyway. Rise anyway. Be undeniable. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living so fully that the people who dismissed you have no choice but to watch you shine.